Hello, today is March the 24th, 2025. It's our Hood River White Salmon Bridge Authority Commission meeting. Brought to order. I'd like to note that on the Oregon side, Mike Fox, the co-chair, Arthur Babbitts, Grant Paulson are all here, and alternate Jake Edwards is here. On the Washington side, Marla Keither, commissioner, is here. Eric Wilson, alternate number 2, is here. Should be noted that Jake Anderson and Mike Shannon, along with Catherine Thomas, are in DC today, talking to congressional staff and Department of Transportation. I believe we do have a quorum, so we'll go ahead and proceed. Is there any modifications, additions to the agenda? If not, can I have a motion to approve the agenda as is?
I would move to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Approval and or correction of minutes from March 10th. Everybody should have had the minutes in their package. Is there any changes that need to be made to the minutes? If not, could I have a motion to approve?
I move the meeting minutes be adopted as presented.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Public comment. Do we have anybody? There's nobody in the room. Is there anybody virtually that would like to participate? If you do, please raise your electronic hand there. I see none. I would also like to acknowledge Seth Gilchrist is on. I'm looking for the rest of them.
Good afternoon, everybody.
And I think that's the balance of them.
Number 3.
Yeah. Okay. So no public comment. Executive. Yes, sir.
Hi. Sorry, just before we get started, I just wanted to establish if I'm voting today or not as an alternate. I wasn't sure if we had everybody. Did you guys already do roll call?
Yes, we already did. So yes, you will be a voting member going forward. We had a quorum without you, but now that you're here, you're part of it.
I guess
Okay.
just Eric Wilson was already called in during roll and he's an alternate.
Oh,
Yeah,
we-
but I'm looking at 3 and
Okay.
3.
Great. So we'll
two
have a full
alternates and 1
6.
commissioner.
Yeah.
Yep.
great. Thanks.
Okay, let's go to executive reports. Co-chair's report, we have none for today. And let's go to project director update report. Mike is on travel. He did give a report in the document. There's a couple of little typos in there. I'm sure you picked it up. It said something about a May meeting. It was actually took place March 17th. I think it's the second or third paragraph. Other than that, I didn't see anything on it. Any
I have
other comments?
Few questions on the project report. Is there someone that can answer those or can I throw them out there and
Give it a
see if
try and we'll see if we
Okay.
can answer it.
So I guess just for continuity, I'm noticing now we're using PDB for project design build. Is that alluding to Kiewit or who are we referencing as the group when we're saying PDB for meeting with HNTB?
Actually, it's progressive design build.
Correct, but
Yep.
who is that referring to?
Right now, it's Kiewit.
Okay,
Kiewit
so
has the contract for a progressive design build until such time.
that's all clear. I found it odd that now we're not just referencing Kiewit meeting with HNTB. It's now saying PDB meets with HNTB. It might be easier
Yeah.
for public clarity
Yeah.
to state the actual group.
To de-acronymize it.
Yes. Yes. And then specific to that, I assume that was a typo, the May 17th, but could we articulate who that was that met on March 17th and who is representing the project right now in those discussions with Kiewit for the negotiations for the next phase of the
Yeah.
project?
Right now, it's strictly HNTV. There's nobody from the authority in those discussions at all.
So it's only staff, no commissioners are present.
That's correct.
Okay. And then what will it be a staff only decision, the deliberation of the project work that might be completed on a 120-day schedule during the transition time, or is there a decision point? And that will come to the committee for further discussion.
Yeah, first off, their HNTB is putting together a recommendation. They will share it with the engineering group as well as the finance group to make sure that we understand why they're putting those things on, how it fits into the organization. Theoretically, if the cost of those elements are within Mike's purview of approved funding, he can move things around. He can do it without the authority's approval. However, I think we will find that since this is pretty important, it'll come to the board.
So will that come to the board for deliberation or just recommendation if it's routing through two committees before it comes to the full authority?
Well, it'll come as a recommendation and then we're going to vote on it.
So I guess I didn't realize it was going through two committees. Isn't there the danger then that it's gone through a quorum?
No, separate, individually. So we're looking at it from, E&C are looking at it from a engineering, construction, scheduling, scoping type of a thing, and the ripple effect of that on design efforts in 1B. Finance and budgeting is looking at it. What does it do to our cash flow that we've got available now? Plus, if it flows into future, what's the impact on that?
So the way we avoid a serial meeting is that they're looking at different elements of
Yes.
it. So no one is looking at, there is not a quorum of people looking at a single element.
We're not, like our group is not looking at what it's going to cost
Right.
necessarily.
Right.
We look at funding and finance. We may know what it's going to cost, but they're the only ones that are looking at what's the affordability with funding.
I think it's probably worth warning everybody as you go into these meetings to stick to the agenda so that we don't end up creating serial meetings.
Mhm.
There really is a risk there.
I think I guess the other thing is in E&C, a lot of what we're looking at is, does it make sense to do that? So does it help the project in perpetuity or is it a short-term thing? Most of everything we've talked about is something that has surfaced or either talked about before or after the risk workshop. And are those some of those risks that we can start to mitigate or further quantify and get down on that? I mean, it's a relatively short list.
I think you have a solid reason why you're doing it. It's just we want to be squeaky clean. And to be squeaky clean, we just need to make sure everybody's quite aware of what a serial meeting is and the fact that this could be a serial meeting if you were to discuss the same items that the other group is discussing.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
I don't think we're doing that.
Yeah, just keep the agenda clear. As long as the chairs keep the agenda, you should be
Yeah,
fine.
the other thing that the E&C is looking at with HNTB during these discussions is, you look at the risk workshop, is there things that perhaps we could add to it that may in fact reduce the cost of the project?
Things we'd add to the risk register.
Yes.
Thanks.
Then I guess just one of these might actually be flagged for the workshop conversation, but noticing that there are a few items that have been called out that are put on pause. Is there active consideration of the mitigation plan if there's not federal clarity soon? And with that, is there a deadline for when we would need to restart some of those items before it would significantly alter the project, even if funding were to come in at a certain future date?
Yeah, I can tell you, and funding and finance knows even more about this, but there is concern that as we progress towards the right, without having funding in place, some of these grants do have expiration dates on them. If we sign the ROD, which we think we're going to get signed here, there's an expiration date on the ROD as well. So we're going to have to, HNTB is going to have to stay on top of that.
Right. How many years is a ROD as a record of decision good for?
You remember?
No, I
Three
don't.
3 years typically.
Yeah,
Years, I think.
yeah. So we don't have it yet, so that's a good thing.
Is the 3 years, we need to be in the ground within those 3 years? What triggers then legacy
Right.
for that?
Yeah, you need to get in construction generally. So
Anything else?
I joined here a little bit late. I just heard about the 17th date and the deliberations with Kiewit. We are having those discussions next week with Kiewit for just the phase 1B discussions, and ENC and FNF are part of those, like Mike had alluded. So
Yeah, you're going to brief us on where you're going with it.
yes,
So we can either agree with it or give you other guidance
yes, absolutely.
to consider.
And then just a note on the right of way. So I know it's been flagged, I think, a few times in this report now that impacts were not included in the 15% design. Is that typical, or was that an oversight? And what implications, what consequences could there be now factoring it in at this stage? Or I guess why weren't
Talk
they?
a little bit more about your concern of right of way, because there's lots of things around right of way. What specifically are you after?
Well, I think I'm responding to the project director's report that it was a flag that it was excluded from 15% design. So I'm curious, one, it seems to be calling out because it's something we need to be aware of. So I'm trying to get insight into why it's being raised. What do we need to be thinking about, or how do we understand better what is alluded to there and what consequences or implications may exist now that it's being integrated into consideration as we move forward.
Which page are you on?
It's on page 11 of the project director's report.
I think it was just my opinion. I think it was the fact we were waiting on direction from FHWA about the resolution for the conflict of interest with the port property. That hasn't really allowed us to move forward on those aspects. And now that they, ODOT is going to be playing that role in the middle, I think we're planning for them to be in that role now in phase 1B.
Yeah, what he's concerned about here is that for negotiating with the port, ODOT has decided they're going to run the negotiation. We won't be a part of it. The issue with ODOT is, like any bureaucratic system, getting them to commit to a schedule and then live to it. That's the biggest concern here. It's not that we think there's going to be a problem getting a deal with the port. It's not going to be a problem.
Right.
It's just,
Well, it'll need their commissioners sign off, correct?
Yeah, and I think
Oh, yeah.
there are a couple steps. So for federal highways, we needed the charter with ODOT to do that. And be
Right.
represented on our-
in Ready, you're working through all that.
Yes, sir. Yep, the charter is almost ready, from what I understand.
There's one other issue that just popped up that ties into this whole right-of-way issue. You guys heard about the ordinance that was passed back in 94, 95 along the port?
It's been in the news, and we hasn't been discussed at this meeting, so you may want to brief people on it.
Yeah, so back in 94, 95 timeframe, if you look at the port's marina area, there's two buildings just to the south of the marina itself. One right now is housing DMV, and the other one was for the what we had before this one. The Bi-State Bridge Commission was in there. There was some thought, and there's a couple of companies that came to the port saying, hey, we would like to consider a land lease right in that particular area and put a small hotel there and a restaurant and whatnot. No decision had been made, but the public got wind of it, and a number of the public said, wait a minute, there's an ordinance there. You're not allowed to do that. Nobody at the port knew about the ordinance. And I guess we had trouble finding it. We finally found it. But the issue is on the south side of the marina where those two buildings are, right adjacent to that as you go to the east, that's where we're gonna have a lay down an access area for the new bridge. We'll build a trestle out north of that going right out. So there's gonna be a lot of traffic coming through there. Having any kind of a hotel right there just doesn't make a lot of sense because of the traffic. But regardless of that, I think the port now haven't fully made the decision, but we're not going to go push it. But we did find out we've got to modify the ordinance because the zone that this covers go all the way up around the edge of the marina where the current port office is, all the way over to the old bridge. All of that is covered. So if we don't change the ordinance, we can't put a bridge on that property.
Right.
So we're going to change the ordinance.
Could you, at the same time, have you looked into the city's Goal 5 ordinance, which is the city code which governs riparian zones? So I know that Kevin was looking into this. I know that you guys are aware of it. Your attorney has dug that up. I was there when that was passed, so I kind of remember it. But can you guys double check the details to make sure that in the setbacks are presumably for people building buildings, not for someone building a bridge. A bridge can't be set back from the river. So, presumably, but it might be worthwhile to ensure that the way is clear.
Good catch, Freddie.
Yeah.
I see this is going to be your action, my friend. Get with Kevin Greenwood and make sure
Yep.
that we get that covered.
Yeah, he sent me, I see Kevin's on also, but
Yeah.
he sent me the copies of all the stuff, which brought back memories. I gotta say. Year-old ordinance, yeah.
I also see Doug Gibson now is on board. So Eric,
I'm done.
you're done, buddy. You're up. So Doug, you're a voting member now going forward. Any other questions?
So I think Marla's original question, maybe answered, maybe I missed it, was is there schedule risk? Is there financial risk?
Of course there is.
I don't know specific to this port issue. The question on the right of way, the port right of way.
Yes, and until we get through the negotiation, yes, it is a risk. I think it's a relatively small risk, but it's a risk until we can get it
So
done.
in your opinion, it's a small risk.
It's a small risk.
And
Yeah.
was that your question? Can't remember.
Other questions? Anybody else?
Kevin has his hand raised.
Yeah, Kevin.
Hello, Kevin Greenwood, Executive Director, Port of Hood River. Just one question I have is, what milestone needs to be accomplished before right-of-way can start taking place, right-of-way acquisition? Is there some key milestone that we can keep an eye out for, knowing that when that's complete, there will be more of a push towards acquiring right-of-way?
Yeah, there's a couple of them. I'll tell you the most important one, and that's funding. If we don't get the 75 million released or something equivalent through the states, everything is moving to the right, including right away. Remember, the first 75 million is going to go for design, which is about a 22-month duration. Then we get into construction. So that's the date we really absolutely have to have all the right of ways done. I would guess 6 months, 9 months prior to that is what we ought to be targeting.
Didn't we at one point, and I don't remember what meeting we discussed it, but it was going through the government to government transfers now, the simple ones, and getting those at least checked off.
Right.
I think the port one is a little bit different because ODOT is going to take the lead on that negotiation. And then I think we have one private party. So those are the two that are a little bit more involved that we're holding on, so to speak. That's my recollection.
Yeah, I think it's all three of those aren't going to be that bad. The private one is probably going to be the the most challenging one, depending on how much money they truly want for it. Indications that I've heard through Mike and others is that and I think the port is not going to be a great big deal there. I think it's just getting the bureaucracy to get going on it. And we're trying to minimize the amount of money we're spending right now to try and delay cash flow and keep the lights on.
I have a question, I guess, still on right of way. Have we completed, has legal drafted and brought forward, and if so, is it in place now, the conflict of interest or the process in which sitting members of the commission that have either port, city, or county authority as well will be removed, and how will that be formalized so that in the eyes of the public, we are all out of these types of discussions by the time we're engaging with any of these entities?
I'm going to turn that over to the governance.
Yeah, so I'm trying to remember exactly where it is in process.
Yeah, that's
But,
fine.
the research had been done, and we had an example of good conflict of interest rules, which the staff thought would be useful. And I can't remember if those were brought forward or not, but in the meantime, it was decided that the only way to get FHWA happy was by having ODOT. Is that, I may be confusing which entities were
Yeah,
involved.
they wanted ODOT to run the right of way for the
Right.
port.
Right,
But
right.
as far as excluding members, anything to do with port right of way, I've excluded.
Right, but we have rules to
Yes.
say that, and I can't remember where we left those.
Reddy, do you happen to know where it is with legal?
Not sure. I'll have to follow up, but what my understanding was, we drafted all of that up and we sent
Yeah.
it to FHWA to review, and they looked at it and
Yeah.
they said, in their eyes, that was not going to be enough, and having ODOT run the show for that portion was the only satisfactory way. And I think that's how we
Right.
resolved it.
This is also where I think Federal Highways was pushing for an executive director.
Right, no, I
Right there.
understand that, but also I thought that the idea was that we were still going to go forward with the conflict of interest rules,
Oh, yeah,
so that we had something in
Right.
place, even though it wasn't satisfactory for this specific circumstance.
that's my understanding.
Yeah, something to adopt by ordinance or resolution, just to memorialize that process.
Right. I can
and,
check
you
on
know,
the status of that one, where that is for adopting.
Okay.
For the
And I
other.
mean, I think, so we who are on a lot of elected boards understand the general state level rules, and that's, for example, why I have had no involvement in the negotiations between the county and the bridge authority on the loan. This was just not because I have a personal interest, but because who am I representing? It's just too confusing. So we do have to get that in writing, and you're right that it should be adopted.
Okay,
We
let's,
have it. I just don't know where it is.
Yeah, that's
So
what I can.
maybe if we just dig down one more level on that, because I know we kind of hit the top a couple of times. Because I think we have a similar problem with white salmon as white salmon owns where the bridge lands on the Washington side. I don't think there's any Klickitat County. Oh, there is some.
well, there is some
Klickitat
Klickitat
County
County,
has
but
some.
Jake is no longer commissioner.
It's not, yeah, so what I think is confusing to me is why it surfaced so much. It was pretty aggressively surfaced on the port piece and not some of the other issues. And I guess why are they seemingly treated differently?
Well, I'm going to make a guess. It's because I'm on both boards. I'm the co-chair here.
But so is
I
Marlon.
have singular.
And
I
Jake
think it
was
might
too.
be, I think it might be Kevin and me that were listed. Well, I am the acting finance director, and Kevin is listed at least as your interim executive director. And then, of course, we have the port
You're
also.
wrong.
That makes some sense.
I think the other pieces were more of a donation, but the port was, money being changed hands. So I think that was their issue.
Yeah, and there was that too.
Yeah.
I'm not sure where White Salmon is.
Yeah, I think more than just the port, our agency is still in active conversation with the Bridge Authority. And I think as those things move forward, it would be good for us to do the housekeeping and make sure that we are all clear about our process and adopt something by resolution. So those of us affected properly remove ourselves from any discussions on the side of the authority.
Yeah, this is Mark Greeno. We have done this analysis from the Oregon side, which is not, particularly complicated because they have disavowed by statute the doctrine of incompatible offices. But on the Washington side, if we're going forward with these types of conflicts, then we'll want to look at them. But I know that we have also weighed in on the abstention type policies that should satisfy the feds. And I think that we are going to be running most of this through ODOT as a response.
Mark, could you just clarify? I think I'm familiar with this doctrine, but there's the concept in Oregon that being a member of a not-for-profit board is specifically excluded from being a conflict of interest. Is that what you're referring to?
No, it's the two public offices doctrine. So if you're both, say, a commissioner of one entity and a commissioner of another entity, Oregon has expressly adopted a statute saying they encourage that. In Washington, there's judge-made law saying that judges will look at that to see if there's some incompatibility, and if so, fashion some remedy if they find a conflict of interest between the two entities.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And I mean, in my non-legal analysis is if there's any confusion as to who you're representing when you're sitting and talking about something, then clearly you shouldn't be doing that, whether it's legal or not.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I mean, I guess what I would say is that the Oregon abolition of the doctrine by statute is a bit of an outlier. So it's probably something that the feds don't run across very often. So when we kind of held that up in front of them and said, you don't have to worry about it, Oregon has abolished this, they said, oh.
Yeah, I think it's more about we as an authority, where do we want to land as a decision? And what I've heard in the past, and I think there may be consensus, is that our preference would be to operate above board and to have some policies and be cleaner than maybe what the Oregon state law allows.
Right.
And so just getting that final check off, which sounds like maybe it's a handoff from legal to staff to get on a future agenda of a resolution that we can all vote and just.
But in the meantime, we're not waiting for it. We're taking action to remove ourselves from discussions.
Cleaner than the law allows.
Yeah, we have done a fair amount of work on this. We did back burner it a little bit because, as Commissioner Fox said, this doesn't become live until we actually have the funding for it. But my understanding is that ODOT has is willing to step in and act on our behalf, which would remove any type of conflict at all in the eyes of the feds.
And you also have approved what you think is good language for us to adopt in some form as a conflict of interest rule for the commissioner, correct?
I believe we have, yes. It's been a couple months, but I can go back.
Yeah, I can't remember. Yeah,
I think it's just
okay.
So,
Okay, I'd also like to recognize Ben is now on signed in. So we have, other than Jake, a full cadre of folks from Washington. Ben, let's see, you are not needed to vote today, but we welcome you here.
Thanks. Sorry, I'm late.
Let's move to government relations. I know, Dan, you're going to start it off, and then at somewhere around 2:30, Brad Boswell is going to join us.
That's right. Thanks, Chair Fox. Just taking a quick look to make sure Brad's not here already.
I don't see him.
Not seeing him. We'll start at the federal level. So we've got a project delegation team on the way to DC at the moment. Summit has set up meetings with the entire relevant congressional delegation happening over the next couple of days here. Props to Jim Kolb with Summit for also getting us a meeting with the Office of the Secretary of Transportation and Federal Highways. That came together kind of at the last minute. So excited to have landed that. Details are still emerging, but looks like that meeting will be held sometime tomorrow, midday on Wednesday. Still not sure who the attendees from the administration will be, but this is the first time we're aware of a specific project getting a meeting with these folks. So excited to see what happens there. So far, the Trump administration still hasn't given any indication on the timing of discretionary grant review, affecting our BIP application, our bridge investment project application. But we'll see what our team learns on Wednesday. Down in Salem, transportation package framework is still underway. A draft has not been released yet, but rumors say that could be coming out in the next couple of weeks. We thought this was coming out first on, I believe it was Valentine's Day. So we'll keep an eye on that. Coming up there, April 1st, we've got a legislative hearing at the Joint Committee on Transportation. So staff is working to organize a number of local supporters to give testimony. Keeping tabs on the scheduling for that, just, based on how much is on the docket that day. Could be a short form hearing, could be long form, could be canceled altogether. But we've got the opportunity to submit testimony either in person, virtually, or written. So we're working on reaching out to a number of local stakeholders to get them organized for that. And I guess a little bit of a preview in the Washington legislature. New budget information is trickling out. We should be seeing draft no revenue budgets from both the House and the Senate in the next couple days. Some information has come out in the last hour or two, and we're working to interpret what that all means. Boswell will give more details there. I'll pause right there before talking about communications topics. Any questions in the GR arena?
So there's been no change on the Washington side. There'll probably be kind of two versions of the bill. The first one's going to be crash and burn, and the second one will be something more reasonable. Is that still the plan?
That's right. Yeah, we expect the first draft to be, the no revenue budget, that, that'll have to show cuts across the board, potentially including to projects like ours, to just kind of set the stage for the next step in the conversation of, what would the budget look like then with a few revenue mechanisms added to it. So that first wave of the no cuts budgets is what we're expecting over the next couple of days here, but it's a much longer conversation than that.
Okay.
I have a question regarding organ funding. Is Thorn run on, or Dan, can we?
I don't see anybody.
They're not on. Nope. I'll be covering.
I guess just one question, knowing the history in the past, it's been difficult to get a future commitment kind of in writing or documented in Oregon. So noticing the flag here, are we confident that that's no longer a barrier? Right now, it seems like the concern is just having a future commitment that appeases US DOT desires. Does that give us an indicator that we're very optimistic about a promise of 75 million in future sessions?
Yeah, I would say like nothing has happened in the last few weeks to change our level of optimism about that. There's precedent, for it in previous sessions, and it's been included in all of our conversations with our local legislators and transportation leadership. Kind of the little like two-phase need we have is well understood, and I think like everybody else, we're subject to the bigger transportation funding package talks, but the need is well known. There's precedent for it, and we're optimistic that that we're going to see results.
Okay, let's move on to partner updates. Anybody?
I thought I didn't know that Dan was done, but I want to tag on to the end of this.
Sure, go ahead.
So Representative Congresswoman Maxine Dexter came to our Hood River County Board of Commissioners meeting a week ago, last Monday. And I did ask her the question of relating to what we were just asking Dan, when will you know what the federal budget looks like? And her answer said she does not expect to be involved at any level of it until the budget comes out, and that's pretty much what we have to expect from reconciliation, that Democrats will not be involved in it, so we will not get any advanced look at any of that. And as for when that will be, the answer is anytime between July and September 1st. So
Yeah,
not
it's
information there, but
it's still a big guess.
it's a complete guess, and really, September 1st is the first time that that's when the fiscal year starts. So presumably you have a operational budget in place by then.
That does call the question, Dan. I don't know if this is for Summit, but knowing significant areas were wiped in the CR that was passed, has anyone done a sweep to even glean insight into maybe funds that were pulled back from what the allocation amount was to BIP back in the 2024 fiscal year, since none of that made it through to awarding or being assigned?
And let me tap onto your question so that we can cue up the whole thing for Dan. In the news last night, there was an item talking about the Interstate Bridge Project, and specifically identifying the BIP funds in the Interstate Bridge Project as something which is in review with unknown deadline, and therefore was talking about that as well as the Burnside Bridge, and identified both of them as projects where those projects are to be delayed because of the lack of information.
Yeah, there was a news article a couple of days ago about the Burnside that I guess the owners have formally,
which is
delayed.
Multnomah County, I believe, or is Multnomah County.
they've delayed the project.
Right.
Anything else for Dan? And if Brad comes on, we'll step back.
Marla, do you want me to take a swing at that question about the continuing
Sure,
resolution?
even if it's just
and
a simple yes or no, but it just came to mind. I'm not aware of us getting any update of just that review now that we know how the 25 budget is operating at the federal level.
Sure. Yeah, my understanding of that is that we basically saw across the board continuation of funding at the previous level, except for a couple of key areas. And defense saw a little bump. I think the WIC program saw a little bump, but I don't think there were any cuts to transportation that would affect how much money is available for the BIP program.
I think where we are, we're a little bit more down the list in that we never got an agreement in place.
Right.
Whereas at least for part of the bridge down in IBR, they did get an agreement in place, and some of these other projects we have not. So to me, that's not a good place to be.
Yeah, I think I was more curious about the BIP, where there was an amount allocated and we're still actively seeking funds that had been promised previously. Infra is a little bit different. Those have been committed, but certainly like our project, other projects are confronting what it means if you don't have everything signed. So I would be curious. I do know that there was a capture across all departments and there were flags about reductions. And so it'll just be interesting to see as DOT digs in if those reductions are found by reducing available funds to some of these programs that maybe they are also revisiting. I think that's really the underlying question.
So there's three different levels. There's appropriation, there's award, and there's obligation. And it seems like none of those is 100% protected, right? So I'm not even sure how much effort, how much you want to distinguish between those three, because none of them seem to be sacred at this point.
I think it just helps to build the landscape, which is pretty blunt right now, but I think as we're considering what the way forward looks like, it's just a kind of reality check that even that active application, I just think we need to really push ourselves and the team to be exhaustive in evaluating what future plans look like, and then also what scenarios we might need to start thinking in more realistic terms about if these funding opportunities aren't as large as what we had envisioned.
And we didn't have any 2025 CIP funding, did we? I think ours was all 2020.
Oh, appropriate, like
That's
CDS.
correct. We did not.
No, we did not. They were all 24 that were folded into the infra award. And so those are now held up and getting that signed, sealed, delivered.
I think to that bigger question, Commissioner Keithler, I can tee up Jim Kolb to address that at the meeting in a couple of weeks here. I think for the FY24 round that our pending application was a part of, those numbers, those levels will certainly stay the same because they were authorized in passed by the previous Congress. So that's still in place. And, hopefully we'll be seeing that, flat funding across the program for the FY26 budget, where if we don't get funding in the last, in this past application, we would most likely be reapplying for that. But yeah, we'll get a little more clarity from Jim on that. And before we move on, if I could just mention one more thing. Last week, Commissioner Keithler and Mike Shannon had a good conversation with Noah Notaboom from the Gorge News. Noah took his lunch hour to come in and talk to folks about the project, just get an update about where we're at. So he is working on a story, and we expect that to be out in the Gorge News, probably in this next edition or the one following. I think those are usually out on Wednesdays. So keep an eye on
Yeah,
your
Noah's online
mailbox for
with
that.
us right now as we speak.
Oh, great.
Okay, if we could, let's move on to the next subject. Get an update from our partners, Federal Highways, ODOT, WashDOT. I'm going to pick on Rob. Do you have anything you would like to add?
I don't have anything. Wish I had better news on any funding stuff.
Yeah.
Changes every minute.
Yep. Let's see, who else is on? Carolyn from WashDOT.
Just wanted to thank the project for coming to our design conference and presenting the bridge project to our engineer. That was well received. Otherwise, we have no real news.
Thank you. I think that's it. Okay, let's move on then. We have a consent agenda to consider. Is there any changes to the consent agenda that anybody would like to make? If not, I would just say that the invoice approvals have gone through both of the committees. And I know on the Engineering Construction Committee, it was approved, assuming Finance and Budget. Yep, I got a nod that it has been approved by that group. With it in mind, can I have a motion?
Are you doing consent for all 4 items?
Yeah.
What the motion is. I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Hold on.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion,
Aye.
discussion,
Aye.
wait. I raised my hand to have discussion.
Okay.
So I just had a question on the task order, the award to Moss Adams. I was just wondering if you could articulate that in kind of the quick 1 or 2 sentences. If you ran into someone on the street, what is it that they are going to be doing in T001?
So we're required to calculate overhead rate. That task is to calculate an overhead rate.
And the requirement for calculating an overhead rate comes from where?
It's federal highways. So what we're trying to do, Marla, is set up such a structure that right now, all of our costs can't be reimbursed by federal. With an approved overhead rate, much more of those costs could be approved and could be reimbursed. That's the purpose of getting us an overhead rate approved. We'll have to do it once every year or so, do an update. It's really going to play as we start to develop a long-term organization for the bridge.
Yeah, and organizations such as ours carry overhead rates. It's a commonality across agencies like ours. It's not anything.
I know that. I think in the interest of the public,
Yes.
This is Greek.
Yeah,
So I think this is an opportunity to also articulate, absent our own authority initiated overhead rates, what would we be allowed to reimburse? Is this an opportunity where the authority is exercising an available tool to ensure that costs are not placed as an unnecessary burden on our population that's paying into it? Okay, now we are talking in language.
That's a big part of it.
Okay.
If we can get a grant to pay for it, then we don't have to pay for it through, if you will, tolls.
Provides us additional fiscal flexibility. allocated grant funds, general funds that we have through our sources of fundings more judiciously. All kinds of ways that allow us to spend money more responsibly.
And absent that, we would just be held to whatever is the issued rates.
Yeah, and it gets very difficult to separate costs and make sure that it's justified. By having an approved rate, it eliminates some administrative costs to try and do that. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, so you're okay?
We should do the vote.
Okay, let's have a motion again.
Well, the motion's on the table. We just need the vote.
Okay.
There was discussion.
Okay.
Yep, you're good.
Let's go. Vote, please. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
2, 3, 4, 6. Okay. It is passed.
Mr. Boswell just joined.
I'm sorry?
Mr. Boswell just joined.
Possible.
Okay. So, Dan, do you want to go ahead and lead the discussion?
Sure. Welcome, Brad. Just to get you up to speed, we did a quick government relations update a few minutes ago. I covered a little bit about what's happening in Washington, that we expect to see the no revenue versions of the House and Senate budgets in the coming few days here, and let folks know that a little bit of information has been trickling out in the last couple of hours, and I will hand it over to you for more context.
Sure, thanks, Dan. So we have both House and Senate transportation budgets. Initial versions are out, including revenue portions of them. We are trying to digest, and they get a little bit complicated, but if we're interpreting correctly on the Senate side, with the new revenue, meaning that they have to pass some taxes in order to get here, it does look like they got to the 125 million goal that we've been setting for them. That's just on the Senate side. The House budget just came out, and I'm still trying to sort through what that means. At least on my initial read, which is still needs more work. They just hold us at the same amount, which was the 75 that has already been allocated. That's not necessarily unusual or surprising in terms of how the normal negotiating process occurs in the legislative process. What I expect to have happen now is they will go through a series of hearings. They will, each side will kind of pass their respective budget bills, probably wait on the actual tax bills that are associated on the transportation side, but they will pass the budgets and then start negotiating behind closed doors. Senator King has been steadfast in his support. He has also signaled in his hearing or in the press availability today that he is prepared to support new taxes for transportation. I believe that any of that support will probably be linked to funding of the Hood River White Salmon Bridge Authority project. Again, we're still trying to digest all of this and really get the details. We'll be working with HNTB team as well as legislative staff to really drill down. But overall, these budgets, well, we can say they're a mixed bag. Just the fact that at least the Senate has acknowledged where they want to go and that we're included in their additive transportation package is a good sign.
So Brad, question for you. In the language, have you seen any movement in what I call the cash flow? Did they
I
leave
can't tell.
years alone and only played with the outer years?
I can't tell yet.
Okay.
That's part of what I'm trying to do. As you guys have, been with me for a few years, when we get starting to try and delineate on the LEAP documents, and I'll spare you too much in the weeds detail, but how they bifurcate that out is something we're just gonna have to sort through with staff over these coming days.
So then a question for Dan you said early April, there's a transportation hearing in Salem. How do we inject where we are in Washington State in support and kind of tell them, hey, here's where Washington's going. In a nice way, you need to step up. Or not so
Yes.
nice.
I think that will be the
Yeah.
work that they undertake.
Yeah.
Or at that point.
Yeah.
I think depending on timing and things like that, Senator King usually has been willing to communicate things to Oregon. Again, I doubt he'll be able to carve up an entire like afternoon for a hearing or something like that. But I do think we can probably work on either getting some sort of written communication or correspondence going from him and at least whatever joint legislative team he can pull together a communication down to
Because I
Oregon.
remember a couple of years ago, there was a kind of a public hearing with the Joint Transportation Committee, and I think he zoomed in and supported us.
Yeah, again, it's some of that may be able to be orchestrated. It's just a function of timing and trying to, see how much scheduling is necessary for things like that. Again, those are things that we're going to be working on over these as we digest all of this detail and try and get clarity as to what they've actually done. But certainly if what I think has occurred on the Senate side, I'm sure he's willing to communicate that. Again, we still have work to do up here in Washington, and I don't see any change on the House side, which means no matter what, that we are a subject of negotiations. And we've been through this before. And I expect that that's going to be one of the things that's batted back and forth as we navigate this.
Doug, you had a question.
No question for me.
Okay. I guess it was just okay. Do you have a question?
I do, yes. Brad, so it sounds like number one, you're just starting to read this, correct? So you haven't fully digested what you have in front of you. So certainly we can understand that these things don't just jump off the page. But could you lay out in very broad terms for us what the steps are from here until the money shows up in our bank accounts?
Yeah, at a very high level.
Very high level.
So again, as I said, the two sides, and by sides I mean House and Senate, are going to kind of pass their respective budgets. Now, one of the things that I also want to make sure that people understand is that not only is there transportation taxes that are in play up here in Washington, but there is also an entire suite of general fund taxes that are going to be extraordinarily controversial and very large. And those also play into this entire conversation. So all of those things are going to be debated and discussed over the next few days as people, pass their varying budgets. That's sort of the process side of things. Once they get that done, then the chairs of committees, both transportation and then appropriations, ways and means, sort of disappear behind closed doors and start negotiating on what the final budgets look like. That also, historically, the way that works is that they will kind of get to a number, at least on general fund and transportation, where those budgets are going to end up at. Once they have that number, then they figure out, how much in taxes they're going to have to increase to get to fill that hole, the difference between what's there now and what is needed to fund those budgets. All of those things are going to be occurring over the next 2 to 4 weeks. If it plays out that, they reach resolution on those budgets, they will put out final budgets probably the last week of session. So session ends April 27th, so sometime probably between the 20th and the 23rd, they'll have final budget proposals that get put out visible to the public. They will kind of go through that process of passing those budgets, and then they will also bring out or identify a suite of taxes that will then pay for that whole. And that'll happen for both on the operating side of the equation and the transportation side of the equation. The reason normally these aren't linked, the transportation taxes and general fund taxes, but this year, because the Senate in their budget actually pulls some funding from the general fund based on the general fund taxes in addition to what they're going to do at the transportation level, all of that is why there's a greater linkage this year. Sometime in that final stage, we should hopefully have clarity as to exactly what our budget looks like and then how difficult it's going to be for all of these revenue tools and budgets to actually get over the finish line and passed and signed by the governor's office. Once that occurs, then based on the funding, and gets to Mike's comment earlier, based on what ends up actually getting allocated within each biennium, is that cash flow question that we're going to try and work toward. It's not going to surprise me if sometime in the next 2 to 4 weeks we end up having conversations with legislative staff about what kind of funding and when do we need it and how to sort of time some of these things. But that hasn't happened yet, but that's not really surprising. They're just trying to get their initial drafts out and passed over for final negotiation.
Brad, to clarify that one point, you're talking about the last $50 million, or are they looking at redoing years earlier?
I don't know yet, Mike. I am hopeful that it's just trying to program that last 50 in some way. But that's one of the things that we're going to have to monitor and try and suss out.
Thanks. That's extremely helpful. And so I think you said the session ends end of April. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
April 27th.
Basically, just a little bit over a month behind everything, right?
Yep.
Thanks. Similar process, but
thank you, Brad.
Yeah, there will be a lot of activity, in these coming weeks. And again, we're working with not just legislative staff, but also the HNTB team on the ground here to really try and dig into these budgets and figure out kind of those details right now.
I think we're really fortunate that given this legislative sessions that the Oregon one is a little bit lagging up, because this is the one that's better formed, makes a better example, and hopefully can then be echoed or mimicked in some way.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Well, we'll be working with your team, as well as connecting with the Oregon folks and seeing what, if any, kind of communication can occur towards Oregon from Washington.
Thank you, Brad. If it's okay with everybody, let's go quickly to the committee reports. Eric, you gonna cover the engineering construction?
Sure. So we met Wednesday last week. I think the couple things that we went through, we talked a little bit about budget and where we are at the end of the risk seminar and how we talk about this. This was a topic a couple weeks ago. I think what we've realized is we are at $1.12 billion. There are probably pressures that are pushing on that, but we need to really just kind of stick with that budget as a moment in time and clarify it when we get to the 60%. Ideally, that's next spring. Depending on funding, that may move out further. The reason that I think that is important, and I pick this up a little bit from the interstate bridge project is until we kind of say that's where we are and that's what it takes to fund our entire project, you can't really get the go ahead from federal highways and move forward. So we know there are pressures pushing on that in both ways, but we just gotta kind of let them move around there and then take our next snapshot when we get to 60%.
The one adjustment to that is that between now and 60%, we want to keep track of those pressures. So we know kind of where we stand today.
We want to track them, but I think the idea that there is a budget and we're looking at adds and subtractions all
over the time.
But,
yeah.
But there's got to be kind of one official. The other thing, talking about the rod and with federal highways, I think there's been an emerging conversation about the base agreement with Umatilla and some suggestion that looking at the TFAS site, which we talked about trying to get some access to or something during construction, is probably best considered a non-starter. So I think we're looking at just staying away from that. There may be some opportunity there, but it's not worth the risk.
Yeah, clarify that a little bit. There's a draft letter getting ready to go from us back to federal highways that says the federal highways have given us a letter that they're willing to sign the rod as long as we acknowledge that we're not going to go get access through the TFAS site.
Tribal fisheries.
Okay. If we agree not to pursue that, they will sign off on the rod. So based on
decision. Record of decision.
Yes.
Just helping with the acronyms here. Public meeting.
So the thought is go ahead and sign it. Let's get it behind us, get the rod behind us. And that doesn't preclude us, and we talked to Federal Highways about this, that down the road, if we wanted to change from a trestle on the Washington side to a gravel causeway, they could have that discussion as long as we don't go on the TFAS site or the tribal fishery site.
So the takeaway is that the rod has some items that are continue to be negotiable and other items that are not.
Correct. And we've heard now from both Yakima and Umatilla that they have grave concerns about us getting construction access through that land. So we just said we've got a workable approach to do it without it. Just keep going that way.
So Eric, to clarify, that's a formal letter from the authority to FHWA that we intend to issue?
Yes.
So that will come to the authority for authorization to sign?
I would imagine so, yes.
Yeah, it's being drafted as we speak. It's gone through a couple revisions.
Okay. We talked about it. I haven't seen the letter yet.
Yeah.
We talked about this a little bit, the negotiations with Hewitt for phase 1B and working through what that looks like and what that end deliverable is. And those are ongoing for the next several weeks before we get to something. The part of the piece there is just the funding piece comes up on that pretty quick. We also talked about the MOAs with the tribes, and it wasn't really clear if HWA is just kind of bringing up some issues about the original Umatilla agreement and how that was arrived at. Whereas prior with the previous FHWA contact, we were asked not to approach the value as a quantitative exercise. So that's kind of.
There was a changing of the guard at Federal Highways with a new person, and the new person is questioning the approach that was agreed to by the previous person.
So that it's a question, it's out there, how that resolves itself. I don't think we're clear on yet. And then we talked about several of the kind of risk items that we talked about earlier, and just what do we want to dig into, and how do we get at some of the items about construction. Is there an advantage in changing the way we're looking at the steel beam structure instead of 4 beams? Do we break it down, and can we get 5 beams in there? Does that give us some benefit? The drilling and how we actually do our diagram's gone, but drill the piers, and there's kind of a whole sequence of process when you drill that, and then you drive your piers in and everything, and it's sequential. So then all the equipment moves to the next one. And so can we orchestrate that dance and really understand, is what we have in the estimate overcooked is the question. It's a validation of that. There's a huge amount of time and effort, and it's kind of a complicated sequence to get all the right equipment in the right place. So there's a lot of opportunity for a little hiccup. And so how much cushion is there, I think, is the question that is kind of bouncing around in our heads. There's some discussion about pile caps, and is there an alternate method of that? And we even heard about this all the way back in the interviews. One of the teams had an alternative approach for doing some of that. So a little more investigation in that. And there was a fourth one that we talked about, and I don't have it in my notes. Mike, maybe you can refresh me. I know we talked about 4, and I only have 3 written down. So it might have been like the causeway and the temporary on the north side or something. But
I have a question. Some of the update you shared sounds pretty technical. So I'm curious what that dividing line is of decisions that are being made by our owner's rep, since we contracted one, and those are the ones with the professional expertise on this project. And what is it that triggers some of those technical evaluations to be going to commissioners, which are really the policy team? What is that criteria?
Marla, I think a lot of these are talking about, I think between Catherine, Mike, and I, these are things that don't seem to be resolved fully in our mind. Is there a way we can get at some additional information for those so that we can either feel comfortable with it or understand that something else needs to be done? That's the first step. I suppose that some of these, for instance, the steel beam one, there's probably a tabletop discussion of, does that make sense, and what is the thing? What part of what we're worried about is the size of the steel, the way it's manufactured, and how much full pin weld do you have to get to that depth of steel? Is there significant savings there? Is there not a significant savings there? If you just kind of intellectualize it, it seems like, wow, that's a lot of full pin welds. Can you do it differently? And I think going back to Hewitt and saying, can we do that differently? Can you scratch your head a little bit, sharpen your pencil? And they're going to say, yeah, we looked at that. No, then it kind of dies there. If they say, well, yeah, maybe we didn't think about that enough. Maybe we could, but I think there's a cost to do that. And then I think that's where we start to get into that.
We're taking it a little bit further than that, because we've gotten input from HNTB bridge experts to help guide that discussion. And what we're trying to do, we all recognized a long time ago, going to the heavier beams could be that only one company could build it, because you have to have massive cranes to pick that stuff up. By going to a thinner beam and 5 of them, that opens up some competition to be able to lift that up into place as a potential. That, what the experts are telling us as well, is that if you go to a 5-beam arrangement, you have a strong possibility of reducing the depth of the deck, which means another cost savings.
But I think what Marla is asking is, how do we take it from those spitball ideas, validate that there's some savings there or something there to dig into, and then make a decision on it or bring it to the authority for some other type of decision. I think it's.
Yeah, I think
That's what you're
I'm
getting at.
coming back to the public process part. Their cost is the top of mind thing here as a commissioner, but also in the community. And right now, a lot of the work that's actually wrapping hands around the bridge structure itself is happening in a subcommittee. And so I'm trying to understand, when do we have the part of the process as we're really preparing for phase 1B and continuing to try to secure that funding, but also in a scenario where the funding might need to be put on pause. What does the record point to when all of the commissioners are evaluating and making that final step of decisions? Since decisions aren't made in committee, they're coming out. And I think what I'm just wanting to hold up and as a hope, or I think an expectation here, is that what we're not going to be doing is just getting everything already being fully fleshed out and in receipt of saying this is the best way. We already concluded it, because that really takes the public out of the process of education. And I think a huge part of a project of this size is us helping and also informing the public as we're deliberating what goes into the bridge and where are those points where they witness publicly the deliberation and the desire to try to deliver this project truly at the lowest possible cost that realizes a new safe bridge. And it just seems right now to this point like there's not been a lot of those opportunities where our public record has been established. And I'm concerned a bit that that mention about working right now to get to kind of what the deliverables are, phase 1B. I can only speak for myself, but I do not want to be a commissioner that's just in receipt of a singular recommendation saying this is the best phase 1B. I think we owe it to the public to be challenging each other and challenging the project team to be working through what sounds like maybe is being worked through by 3 commissioners right now instead of the full board.
Well, that may be a fair assessment. I think everything that we're talking about now is incremental cost savings, not order of magnitude cost savings. So the order of magnitude decision was going from concrete to steel. And even that, I'm not sure was an order of magnitude, but that was a significant point of departure.
I would think that as we proceed forward on these 3 or 4 items, and there's going to be more, Kiewit's going to hopefully bring some forward as well. As we get the analysis done and an estimate is completed, and I think we should be bringing it back to the authority for, hey, here's what we've been doing. Here's the means that we've been trying to drive cost out of this thing. And here are some areas that we've looked at. These are the ones that didn't work. Here are the ones that look like are very promising.
Well,
and if you have other ideas, bring them up.
I think a lot of those decision points when you get to is here's an opportunity to save cost, and these are the implications, and that's where you get to a decision. A lot of what we've been doing now is we don't want to spend that much on a bridge. How do we squeeze it? And so far, I'm not aware that we've really got to any of the, okay, so you want to take that money out. This is the implication of that. We haven't gotten to that point yet. And I guess in my mind, that's where we need to have a broader, more in-depth discussion. And in my mind, I think we're still trying to define the problem that we're providing a solution for. And the problem is, it's not just a bridge across there, but it's how do you do it and how do you fit all the funding and all those pieces together. So I don't know that we've given anything away yet.
How would this phase be different if we were not operating in a progressive design build structure and this was a traditional design bid build? How would the design process look different?
I would hope we'd be very similar. The benefit to the progressive design build, Marley, is that you have a construction entity looking at the design. So you're building in constructability into it.
Yeah, we wouldn't have a cost right now. we wouldn't have the estimate that we have.
So we are working right now in consultation with Kiewit. Yes, the completion of my question is in consultation with Kiewit, who is contracted under Progressive Design Build. And so we are taking their guidance with the active assumption that they are constructing and building this bridge.
Yes.
And that is what is informing some of the decisions at this time.
Yes. I think that goes back to Mike's comment about are we sure that as we design this bridge that any bridge contractor could go out there and build it? Or are we limiting it by the equipment that's available by one contractor? That's something that's kind of balancing out.
Are we only listening to Kiewit? No. We're listening to HNTV and we're listening to folks that have some experience, and we're melting all of that together to try and get to the best decision.
I think visiting with the IBR team that we did in mid-February was just really, really helpful. There wasn't a lot of detail there, but just seeing that they're dealing with the same sorts of things we're dealing with at the similar times. Their order is a little different than our order. It was interesting to me that our order is more similar to one of their previous versions of their effort. That was not real good, but so I think just that type of discussion I think is really helpful. And could there be more public outreach, Marla? Yes, there obviously can.
I think I'm more concerned about the public hearing part. We're a public agency. This is a public funded project. I guess maybe what I'm asking is it'd be nice for the rest of the authority to understand when this shifts out of that committee and we're in that final stage of true still active deliberation and discussion to finalize what a 1B looks like. And when do we expect that work to start coming into the full authority for decision?
If I could sort of summarize what I heard as answer to your question, because you started with a process question, which effectively is how did a group of commissioners sitting on a committee get involved at this technical level in this sort of detail? And the answer that I heard was that it was self-initiated and that it will be coming back to a broader discussion, but that it was self-initiated. It wasn't something that was where Kiewit or HNTB asked them to go through this process, right? So from a process point of view, they sought additional information based on their own personal curiosity.
Yeah, I think if I understand you correct, there are questions, I know myself, and I think Catherine to a certain extent, Mike, but just that between the ICE, the independent cost estimate, and Kiewit's opinion of probable cost, OPC, that there were some discrepancies through there. And when we went through we decided to use our independent cost estimate, which is lower. And there are several areas that have more discrepancy than others. One is the schedule. Kiewit's schedule is quite a bit longer. Another one is equipment costs that came up. And then we get down to the more material type of things, like we mentioned, beam sizes and what the mills spit out regularly and what that means when you put it up on site. So you can take some of those off in the overall project schedule and probably the equipment cost discrepancy. That's probably not going to shake itself out until we get in through a final design and have some sort of 60% documents to start to resolve. So did I get that?
Yeah, no, I just want to make sure, I want to hear if Mayor Kiefler thinks that.
You're really good at disseminating that.
I'm just trying to figure out what's going on here. So are you comfortable with the description of from a process point of view, do you have lingering problems with this?
No, that's helpful. Again, this will be the most regionally significant project. And so as a commissioner, I guess I am a bit speaking for any commissioner that's not currently on that committee. There's a lot of the that evaluation that we are not privy to. And so it's helpful to understand where you're focusing your deliberations on, that it's about schedule, equipment cost, and material at this stage, if I'm tracking correctly, for how you are landing in consults with Kiewit and HNTB on advisement of likely paths forward as they're refining phase 1B. I'm still just hopeful, and I guess that last question is, as the authority, when we are in receipt of what is the recommendation on phase 1B, is that coming to us still with areas where, as the commissioners, we will feel like we are having some direction and say, or areas called out that need further deliberation? Or is that going to be coming forward saying, this has all been fleshed out, here's what we should approve?
I think it's, and I'm going to go out on a limb and speak for myself. I think there are several conversations that are coming up that probably involve a broader discussion. Mike mentioned the causeway earlier. So right now, everything that we're designing and intending on doing does not include that. That is a significant, likely a significant cost savings in approach. It affects time, it affects material, it affects the how quickly the work can actually be accomplished. It's going to have some optics if we go out and build a peninsula out in the river for 500 yards or whatever it is. That, I think, is going to affect the community. I think the community will probably have a lot to say about it before we do that. I think that ought to have a pretty in-depth discussion. We don't even know if it's possible to do that yet.
Have you seen the pictures of 1937 when they did this?
Of the early, I'm sorry.
When they reconstructed the bridge in 1937,
yes.
They had the same.
I've seen some pictures of that
area. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, and I just, can't we just lower the lake?
And actually, we're going to go ask the dams whether we can.
I mean, historically, they've lowered it for boat races.
So Ready is still here. So I'll throw this out, another personal thing. Ready is involved to the level on this that on a project when I was an architect, that would be the level I would be involved in. And so this kind of being a commissioner and being a little bit hands-off is a little bit different for me too. So I don't know all the detail that I'm accustomed to.
I was gonna say the
frankly, I
same
don't have
thing
enough
there,
time.
Eric.
So
yeah, we are here to deal with the day-to-day and the minutia here, but in our schedule we are allowing for interfaces with the engineering committee and the other committees as required to keep them informed of all the decisions that if there are small decisions, we do communicate to them. If we feel significant input required, those do come up to the committees as discussion points where commissioners are providing inputs, and we're taking those in the appropriate direction from there. And specifically for phase 1B, Marla, we are meeting with Kiewit to discuss on our topics to see where we're landing with the costs and the scope details. But we do have touch points scheduled with the committees to inform them, where we are going to be and how it's shaping up to be. And if there are other significant items during our discussions that we feel that we're not landing, on the same page we are going to seek guidance on how to approach those negotiations. So we have all of that built into our schedule. We have a couple of negotiations scheduled with Kiewit coming up. After the first one, we have consultation with the ENC on updating on how it's going and where we see things are aligned, where they're not aligned, and how we want to move forward with. And we're going to strategize around that and go back for another negotiation part. So all of that has been taken into consideration from a process perspective is what I wanted to answer. So.
Great. You mentioned committees plural, but is it correct to assume what you meant is that it goes to the engineering committee if it needs further commissioners, it comes to the authority? It's not going to multiple.
Right. I mean, it depends on the topic. Yeah. Yeah. The schedule and scope parts, ENC committees, the financial implications of that part goes to the FNF committee. And in the instances where I think like the BIP application where we had to more of a communications perspective, we've come to the communications group as well. So depending on the topic at hand, it goes to the appropriate committees what we feel. So
Just a
And
word
again,
of
this
caution
is
for you. As we move forward into 1B, we'll have a scope of work for 1B that's approved, go you for it. Does that mean we're never going to have any more changes? No. There's going to be constant change between now until we open the bridge that we're going to have to deal with. Some of it's going to be totally outside of our control, but we're still going to have to deal with it. As the price of steel goes up and down, we're going to have to somehow figure out how to absorb the hit, if it is a hit. And that's going to be constant. We can kind of ignore it and then get surprised, or we can get involved in it as it's identified and try and deal with it.
So on that, so do you want
Go ahead.
So on that exact point, you referred to the budget number. I know there's been a fair amount of discussion about the fact that we have to have a project cost estimate, probable
Opinion of probable cost.
cost. We have to have opinion of probable cost, but that is not necessarily what we're communicating to the public as what the bridge is going to cost, because that is something which meets the very specific and esoteric requirements of the various agencies that are monitoring this, and is not what a member of the public would commonly call, gee, what do you think this is going to cost, right?
Yeah, it's a lot more fluid than.
Let me add something to that.
What you write
Today at 15%, which means we got 15% design done.
Right.
The estimate says it's going to be this.
Right.
At 60%, we're going to do another estimate. At that time, we're going to know a lot more about design and the repercussions on construction. We're going to come out with another number.
Yes.
And more than likely, it's not going to be exactly the same number. Hopefully, it's a little less or a little bit more, but tight around that number. If we're successful, we want to drive that number down, not up.
Right.
But we've got a lot of issues that are pushing on us realistically, that if we're not really careful and we're not really driving this thing, it's going to go up.
Every number that we talk about in the engineering sense is a bundle of assumptions.
Yes.
Right. And there's a problem communicating a bundle of assumptions to people. And that's where I think the communications issue gets really interesting, that we don't want to say things and then come back and say 6 months later, but you said this, like, yeah, we said this with these assumptions. And so I think we have to be really careful about what we want to be as honest as we can when we share things publicly about what the expectation should be for a member of the public as to what this is going to cost.
Yeah.
And, you know, in a lot of cases, I don't know is actually a really good answer.
And I would like to remind that the risk workshop also just, we came out with a range of outcomes at the end of the risk workshop, right? And our
Right.
1.12 happens to be pretty much in the middle of that range. So we are not, like communicating something different at all.
Right, but I'm sorry, even when you look at that range, if you go and say publicly, here's the range that we came out of the risk workshop, and people would naturally assume, okay, so the final number is going to be somewhere between the high point and the low point. But in plain language, that's actually not true, right?
It depends on the assumptions and how they flesh out during design. So yeah.
Exactly.
So,
and that's what we have to help people understand.
Yes.
And I don't know how we do that. I'm really eager to hear what comes out of what Dan has to say on that.
And I think, I mean, that's all great. And what we see happening right now, our original schedule, we're supposed to be starting design here.
Right.
And right now we don't have the funding to do that.
Right.
And we have a finite work window every year.
Right.
So the reality is that's probably a $40 million hit.
And we have not yet publicly stated that, but I mean, we in public meetings we've talked about, so clearly the information is out there, but we haven't made a formal statement yet on that, right?
Well,
am I correct?
Yeah.
And so that's another concern of mine, that we kind of have this hanging out, that any alert member of the public knows that we've strongly hinted that we're not doing in-water work in the in-water season in 2026.
25 was the original plan.
Oh, I'm sorry, at 25, yeah, right.
So
See, no, I'm doing it.
yeah.
Thank you.
Well, but it's those assumptions and, 25 is gone, so 2026 and that window is beginning to close on 2026 right now. So that's $40 million.
It's more
I
or
think
less
this, I think what it gets to, for a project that's significant, it feels at times like when we are convening as a full authority, the information is pretty sanitized. It's, if you were an engaged public member and you were watching every single one of our meetings, it should be likely, because we are a public agency and decisions and deliberation happens in the public forum, that you could be an armchair quarterback on this project and have knowledge about many of the deliberations that are being discussed.
Sure.
That is not a record that has been established by this authority, and that's concerning to me. And the other part of that is also difficult is it means right now there's been a breakdown. I think this will be the workshop we talk about. There is not this fluid flow of information. You are living way more immersed in this project than a commissioner on the Engineering Construction Committee is living way more immersed in this project than a commissioner sitting on governance, a commissioner sitting on communications, maybe to a degree, a commissioner sitting on funding and finance. But there is not the same filter and flow of information, which is needed by all committees for those specific areas of focus to be operating at the highest level of capability. And so, yes, it has been difficult for staff, especially because we have yet to ever be out in front of effectively messaging known factors, because the factors seem to stay within a committee and come belatedly, especially over to the communications committee. And that is concerning. It is limiting our ability to communicate to the public. But more distressing as a commissioner is feeling like this is not being a project worked through and deliberated in the public space. It's not a private project. And I just am speaking to try, as all of us are settling into these positions, raise this up as a point of concern, especially for our workshop, of how we get that corrected so that the public discussions on this project are as informed as they should be when this is being funded by public dollars. That's my.
I don't, go ahead.
Well, I had a question, maybe a little more broadly, is you bring up these cost savings that you're investigating. And I guess what I would like to know is, now, is that coming from the engineering committee and HNTB, or is Kiewit providing some of these? Because the way you framed it sounds like your committee and HNTB is bringing ideas to Kiewit and then Kiewit's evaluating it. So is that the case, or?
No, they're all part of the discussion of the workshop, but it does fall partially on the Kiewit to evaluate it. And our cost estimating team to evaluate it.
Yeah.
We did ask HNTB to have a couple of their bridge designers spend some time with us, look at what Kiewit has done and just say, hey, is there anything that looks off or seems weird or seems out of sorts? So that was also part of our discussion with the IBR team. It ended up being more general than that, but
yeah. Well, I think maybe to piggyback on Marla's comment, it would be good to know that what specifically you're looking at, because like I've never heard any of this information before today, but it would be that I think that's a piece of information that us as committee members and as well as the public would love to know. Hey, this is we're deep diving on the peers, and we're gonna really look into that. I mean, that's some really important information that we could be sharing. Like we on the communication side could really formulate some ideas of how to present. Hey, this is what we're doing day to day to make this bridge as safe and as cheap as possible. Maybe not cheap, but cost effective as possible. So maybe sharing that information would be.
No,
really
that's it.
important.
I wanted to address that, Jake, real quick, because we hear you, absolutely. We want to bring every idea, but we've also run into situations where we talk about some random idea and it gets pushed into being, like a rod is being delayed because you're talking about this. You have to absolutely flesh this out. Your rod cannot move forward. Your funding cannot move forward because of XYZ ideas. So bringing every single discussion to a public forum, we found is not really fruitful until you vet them to a certain extent. And that's kind of what we are doing internally and bringing those along, far along where we can bring those back to the board is what I would offer to that, because every single idea, just putting it out on the table has not really worked well for us in the past.
I think your comment about increasing the communication between the groups is absolutely great. And I don't think there's any group that's trying to hold another group kind of away. We just need to figure out how can we share that data, because there's a lot of data moving around and this thing is moving very, very quickly. So one of the things I think we're going to talk about at the workshop is how do we improve that? Now we could bring all of that to this commission, and it may mean that we're going to extend the duration of the meeting considerably, or we could give you copies of the notes that we do every 2 weeks, or some combination of both of them, or something else.
I mean, I think we need to spend more time really defining the problem. I'm an architect, so we're talking around the edges of a problem, and I don't think we've gotten to the root cause of it yet. But we're talking around the edges of wanting. We're talking about effects. I want more of this. I want more of that. I want more of this. So what's the root cause, and then how do we get at it? And I mean, we're going to talk about a workshop. I think there's. To talk about how we've done. One of the other things that I've always worked on, the idea that you've got a problem you're trying to solve, you got to define the problem, you got to talk about the problem before you get to any discussion of trying to resolve it. Then you need to look back, however you start to resolve it, and say, did it do what it was supposed to do? Do we need to reevaluate? And there's kind of a circle of conversations and an iterative exercise. And we made a bunch of decisions early on to divide up into 4 committees. And I don't know where we are on the agenda, but divide up into 4 committees and proceed down the road. Okay, so we've done that for a year and a half. I would suggest that maybe it's not working quite the way we were hoping, or all were hoping. So maybe we ought to sit down and reevaluate that and see if we can figure out what is not working on it. Is there a way to do it? We've got a lot of rules that circle that make it kind of cumbersome. And maybe that's just what we need to embrace and then figure out how to do that. But
yeah,
I'm just kind of rambling now. So
at the end of the day, any decision that's made by this authority should have a public record. That's as simple and as clean as what I am raising up here. I get uncomfortable because I feel like we don't have a good public record established on, as we're moving through this process, designing the bridge, on what that public record is for how we will at some point take a vote authorizing an amount of money to be spent on phase 1B. So phase 1B is an example, and I completely agree. I think we were just at a good natural point to revisit how we've been operating, but that would be the litmus test for me, is any decision that we are making in this forum as an authority, there should be a pretty well-established public record of deliberation and contemplation and good dialogue and questioning to inform how we will eventually take a vote.
Let's move on. Okay, governance, you got anything you want to bring up?
Unfortunately, I have a password issue where from my pad, I can't get access to things I can get access to at home. So I don't have my notes in front of me, but my recollection is there's nothing that rose to the level of, this meeting is going long and I don't think there's anything that we need to talk about here.
So let's get into, I believe it's an action item, the April committee workshop. There was a couple of agendas, basically the same agenda, but 2 options, one to split this into 2 meetings and one to have a single meeting. And if we could we first go to page 25 of your package? We've got some holes as far as commissioners and their availability of time. So I'm going to put Ben, Nathan,
Doug and Seth.
I'm sorry?
Doug and Seth as well.
Okay. See, mine doesn't show anything for Doug, Seth, and the rest have responded.
So is there a question?
Yeah, the question is, for those that we just talked to, are you just can't support a April 7th, an April 8th, or an April 9th workshop? And if so, that's fine, but I just want to make sure that before we pick a date, everybody's had an opportunity to show their availability.
So let me throw in there, Mike, I think on the afternoon of the 7th, right now, there's just Marla that is a maybe. Everyone else, we've got 2 no's.
The afternoon of the 7th and the afternoon of the 8th looks the best so far.
I can be here as long as I can get a babysitter for Piper. Unless you guys want her to come, that's not.
Well, I heard she does real well with keeping meetings moving along.
Do we have an estimated time commitment for that? I could be
3 hours.
potentially, but it's our school spring break during that time.
Yeah, it's 1 to 4, and it'll probably go 1 to 4.
Thanks, guys, for the opportunity to provide my input on this. Would you like it now, or would you like me to fill it in and send it back?
Let's do it now so we can try and pick a date today.
Okay, sounds good. I am a yes on Monday afternoon, no on the morning, unfortunately. I can be it would be a no for Tuesday afternoon and a no for Wednesday. Unfortunately, I'm traveling that week, so.
Okay. How about Doug? Do you have any thoughts there? If you can't, you can't.
It's pretty challenging. If I can, it'll be Monday afternoon or Tuesday afternoon. I could do maybe Wednesday morning. But that would be remote.
Did I hear someone say this is spring break for some people?
Yes.
Maybe a week would be a better start.
Oh, one thought I had, especially if it becomes 2, is do we not consider having the structure of an upcoming commissioner meeting to be a majority of the time spent on whatever one of the 2 topics becomes?
Let's get a date first.
Yeah, well, then we'd still need a date, but yeah, the following week is already a standing meeting. So if there are scheduling issues, oh, Ben, I see your camera's off. Did you?
I was just gonna weigh in as well. Monday the 7th, I could do the afternoon. Wednesday is open for me as well. Tuesday I have a conflict.
Looks like Monday afternoon's the best so far still.
Yeah, it looks like. So what do we want to do? We want to delay, delay this for the next commission meeting, and we'll probably have to extend it a little bit, but limit the discussion to this? Or do we want to proceed forward with Monday afternoon, the 7th?
So I think the other issue that's kind of floating around is there are 2 kind of main topics. One is kind of our structure and is it working and should we reevaluate that? And 2 is a kind of a discussion on financing and where we are. And no, there was a 1-pager done for the DC trip. I was wondering if that was available, but
I'm thinking if we incorporate this into one of our standard meetings, you definitely want to split it.
I think you're right.
I think that in any format that we do it, these are both very large, very difficult things, and people's brains don't tackle 2 very large, big things in one meeting very well. So I really don't, I would not, if I were scheduling a meeting, I would never attempt to discuss 2 things like this in one meeting.
So let's see if we can get to a resolution on one item. Should we vote on 2 separate meetings? Does everybody agree that this is probably the best way to do it? Do 2 separates?
I don't necessarily see that we need an entire meeting to go over the finances of this, the various decision points for this. I don't know how long it would possibly take, just dealing with it all the time. The decision processes to go through the financial side of it is not as complicated as portrayed.
And we're in a situation where the conditions are gonna happen. We just have to react to them, right?
A lot of those decisions are out of our control.
Yeah.
Oh, but still understanding the pathways that result from those.
Still understanding those pathways, yes, but understanding those pathways and going through them does not necessarily necessitate a large workshop.
Grant, I think where we are here.
So we still do it if we want to, but.
Your group, engineering group.
Yeah.
Is very much involved in the intricacies of this moving machine that we've got here.
Sure.
And there's a lot of moving parts that interplay with each other. The other two groups are not.
No,
so it's going to take a little bit of time to kind of catch you up to a kind of a minimum base level to understand. When you say it's really pretty easy. It is pretty easy once you have that feel.
Not easy, not as complicated as.
Granted.
Yeah.
So maybe does it make any sense to try to put one topic in one authority meeting and the separate topic in another one? And I think what I heard today is in 2 weeks, we're probably going to have maybe more information on the state side. Probably not on the federal side, but we may have something on that. And I think the committee thing, I think, is a deeper discussion if we're gonna, because I think there's things that we're frustrated with. I think some of those are coming out of the public structure of meetings and the way we've structured ourselves in our committees to work with that. And I think we need to probably spend some time talking through that and understanding.
I would like to propose that on April 7th, we have a special meeting at which we discuss these scenarios, and that April 14th meeting, we strip down, you can suggest a different one, but April 14th meeting that we strip down the agenda and leave a good amount of time to have a discussion on the process committee questions that I would raise as the other point.
I would recommend we do it just the opposite.
I understand. That's why I wanted to put something down so we can talk about it.
And the reason why I would propose we do it opposite, proposing it's a public meeting, but it's not videotaped. So we have a little bit more freedom to let it go where it needs to go.
Why isn't it videotaped?
I'm sorry?
Why isn't it videotaped?
Because I think that was,
requires it, yeah.
To provide.
It's a workshop.
Zoom is required for any meeting of the commission.
We don't need to record it, but we would need to take minutes if you got to.
And then we also have to provide opportunity for people to, people have to be able to see it from remotely.
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. So either way, that argument is, but I think Grant has a different argument to make for the same idea.
Same thing, just flip flop.
Because
I don't think we necessarily need an independent meeting to go dedicate that much time to financial scenarios. I think dedicating our time to address the committee question.
How do we work together?
Yeah, so is more important and pressing.
When you say financial scenarios, and I'm viewing this as a broader discussion than you are. Because I think it's more than simply financial scenarios. There are grave implications of various possible pieces of information that we may discover down the road, and everything multiplies into 6 or 7 different pathways. And so even just mapping that out, you're saying that there's a simple, you could lead a discussion where we could have a simple set of
decision tree. Yeah, a big decision tree with a lot of those things. And a lot of those are in the risk register.
I think how I think about it is a minimal amount of time is on the funding. Like in my mind, as I understand the project from my vantage point, the information I'm getting on the subcommittee I serve upon, there's 3 scenarios that I want to talk through, and they're all tied to infra. And they are all about what do we do in different scenarios. Infra funding goes away completely. We just lost $200 million. As an authority, we need to confront and talk through, and we need staff to be supporting us on how do we responsibly move the project forward and how far can it go? And what do we need to, as fast as possible, level up in terms of advocacy to fight to keep the project. Then a second one, infra is going to be somewhat delayed. Under that are some subsets, significant delay or about the delay we're anticipating right now to sustain. And then the great scenario, we are pleasantly surprised and the infra money comes forward split up as we've requested, or infra money comes forward but not split up. And those underneath them are the decision points that are less about you have $50 today or $50 tomorrow. It is about us all being clear and being able to answer to anyone how we landed on the decision. So when one of those plays out, we've already at least started the deliberations. So that to me is like one workshop, and maybe that's what you were getting to, but I think that does require, I think we are best served to create the necessary space and time for everyone, however they're entering that conversation with the knowledge they have at this point, to sit, confront, and ask the questions that come forward. So that's to me a single workshop. And it's really about how are we keeping this project going with the most uncertain thing, which is whether this 200 million, we think a lot of assumptions on, is coming, not coming, or coming on a different schedule.
I guess from my engineering experience, the problem I see is one of fully enumerating the possible pathways. And this, certainly from where I sit, it smells and feels like a big task. And I know that you know what you're doing. So when you say, oh, it's not that bad, you make me want to say, okay, maybe I've just overestimated this, but I sure want to make sure that I have enough time in that meeting to ask all the questions. And I suspect that, man, look at how long it's taking us just to find the time to have a meeting. I suspect that this is going to, not mushroom, but I think that it's going to require more time than you're going to enjoy. But it will require more time because I think you're imagining that it's going to be easier to bring us along, and we have to really get up to speed, and I'm just not there.
That's fine. The mathematical side of it is straightforward.
Yeah, I'll take you at your word on the math. I'm talking about the enumeration of cases.
I get it.
Then discussing some of the implications, both in terms of what we communicate, but more so in terms of implications like what does this mean for the current bridge?
Yeah.
What should we have an obligation under the commission formation agreement to notify the Port Commission of certain factors that might be coming out of this workshop, and what does that look like? That's not a trivial thing. None of that is. So.
Would we hope to get out of that meeting a clear understanding of kind of at what date we would take action if we haven't heard back affirmatively that we're going to get the 75 million from infra, and kind of what those actions would be?
Sure.
Is that a reasonable assumption or expectation for this meeting? So I think, part of it also comes to, we've had some discussions about, how we're working with HNTB and with Kiewit and what the future of those is, and future of internal staff. And I feel like, until we have a really clear sense as far as what at least the next year of the project is going to look like, and where that funding is going to come from, it seems like it's really hard to make any big changes or know that we're going to take the right direction, that any effort that we put into making substantial changes is going to stick until we have some certainty around, where the next funding is going to come from.
Well, I agree with you that you guys, we need to understand the key decision points. That if we don't get the 75 million, how much longer can we keep the project going? And what do we want to do during that period of time? And when do you start closing things down, worst case? When do you start, and what does that look like?
We're using public monies. Are we responsibly using those monies? Even if the monies are available, does it make sense to keep using them?
As long as you can provide benefit that will have some value at some point in the future. I think that's.
Well, it's a good
that's the
question. I
hard
don't know.
one.
Is that the test? I don't know. Some value.
I don't know, but in my mind
Right.
it is.
I think if you spend $1 million to identify something that has marginal value to the public, I probably would say no.
Yeah.
The benefit cost analysis of the bridge has shown that it has economic value to go through this exercise and build the bridge.
Well, I mean, our mandate is to build a bridge, right? So as long as we're putting the money towards uses that are moving us further towards that goal, then that's an appropriate use of it. I mean, it's not really up to us to determine, could the public have a better use of those funds? But at some point, if we don't feel like, if we're just paying to keep I think we got to work through what, some of the different contingency plans would look like and how those could run. Which to me is not, it's like the financial models are straightforward enough, but the understanding of what to do with them and what the different scenarios could look like really, could go in a bunch of different directions. And the answers to how to proceed from there, at least from what where I'm at, I don't have a clear understanding of what we do in different scenarios and exactly when things get actioned. And I think those are really important for us to understand and all be on the same page about to as great of a degree as possible. I mean, you can't plan for every unknown contingency, but at this point we have an uncertain timeline of when, a critical piece of our funding is going to come into play. And we can hang out and wait for a little while longer. That's probably the right thing to do. But at some point we need to take action, and we should know when and what those actions are.
Yeah, but if we have a circumstance where, as an example, we heard that our record of decision has a shelf life of 3 years, there's going to be a question of how much money in this case, I know it's not a lot of money aimed at this, but if there was significant money, you would question how much money you should spend getting something that has a shelf life when you have, if you see more likely the scenarios of not being able to meet that shelf life.
So,
right.
For instance, the Interstate Bridge project in a previous iteration had their record of decision.
Right.
And then they didn't have any funding. Right. So they have spent the last 3 years trying to redo that record of decision. And now it's being questioned again, and that risk of having to do that over. And our project is much simpler. There aren't that many options that are going to drive some of that, but at the same time, you gotta ask yourself, that's our immediate push right now. But if that funding doesn't continue, is there something else? How it's right. That's got a finite shelf life. Some other things too as well.
A real simple question that's going to be facing us, guys, and that is, if it doesn't look like we're going to get construction funds sufficient for the project anytime soon, do we still want to continue and finish design and get it on the shelf?
Right.
If the answer is no, then that leads us down a path to shut things down.
But the answer is it depends. And that's what we should talk about.
Oh, yeah.
What that means. Yeah. And I know Jack wanted to jump in too.
Well, I would say in response to what Grant said, it's more a philosophical discussion than it is a numbers discussion, because you're talking about what is value, what do we put as value to the public, and then what do we feel is important that should be done to put things on the shelf. So I view it as a more philosophical discussion among the commissioners about, if we go down this path, what are the things that we want to see accomplished and in the most benefit to the public?
I would bet that philosophically that we would probably all come down on the same side, that anything that drives us towards, checks off an item on the list of things you need in order to get a bridge is going to be something that we're going to find value to. But there are corner cases that I think we're going to have to knock against.
And that leads to a whole bunch of series of other questions, let's say you assume that we're gonna go ahead and design.
Yep.
Okay, what do you want to design? Do you want to design it where only Kiewit can build it?
Right.
Or do you want to design it that you're gonna put it out on the street?
Right.
So I'll make a motion to set a date of April 7th from 1 to 4 p.m. for a workshop to discuss future scenarios.
I think that was what I already did.
Did you? Then I'm seconding.
second.
Remove my motion. I will second Arthur's motion.
I should have said it's a motion. So I propose. I didn't use the.
There you go.
I propose.
Further discussion? Okay, all in favor of April the 7th, 1 to 4? I guess right here. To start our discussion on our issues here, and we'll decide what that looks like in a minute, but are we good with 1 to 4 on the 7th?
The motion is to discuss the scenarios. So the motion is setting what the first meeting will be about.
So we're not going to talk about the structure or the operation. We're going to talk about.
Well, that could be a future motion, but.
You can disagree with the motion, but that was her motion.
Yeah, I'm just trying to clarify what her motion was.
Yep.
Okay.
So we discuss it now.
Any discussions? The only question I have, I want to make sure that I understand. If there's kind of two topics here. One is how do we work together in committees? And the other issue is where are we on the project and where is the project heading in a number of different scenarios? So I think what you're after, Marla, your recommendation was to do the second one on the 7th.
What's on the floor is a vote to have a meeting on April 7th that talks about the funding scenarios, the scenarios of the way forward on this project in the near term.
I think we're saying the same thing.
Yeah.
And so to further that discussion, while it's not part of the motion, I think that the other piece, committee piece, could be done at either the next meeting or a series of meetings.
Okay.
Broken down into smaller chunks. I don't think there's the same time requirements on it. Maybe we should talk about that for a minute, because I've been presuming that we're looking to make some changes around July 1st, kind of when we have some turnover on the group and when we start a new season, et cetera. But that's kind of just built into my thinking. Maybe you guys all thought that we're going to do something that we're going to that this is critical to us continuing to operate through the next couple of months. So we need to do this right up front.
I mean, I can throw in here, I'm just looking at the comments that have come out and my own thoughts, and they don't necessarily jive. And I think us as an authority, if we were together when we had our partnering group, I think we've got different ideas and we've done this, and we need to get back together. I think that's a fairly involved process.
So the way I would see it, by doing this first meeting and talking about where are we on the project and funding and options and so on, that brings all of us back to the same topic.
Yeah.
Then the next meeting is, okay, based on how we're structured now and how it's working now, what would we change to improve it, to make this better?
How do we reflect on what we've done and refine it and do it better?
It may take more than one meeting.
And I
think that's the sort of subject that could be done in multiple meetings, where the other subject I don't find to be as dividable into bite-sized chunks.
Well, yeah, I agree.
Okay, so exactly the opposite way, but that's okay.
You have different experience, and that's why I certainly Grant saying that gave me pause.
Yeah,
but
I think and I've been involved in some of the numbers, and Grant participates with us sometimes.
I can't wait to see how simple this is.
I actually
put money in the checking account. It gets so real simple, real fast.
I actually changed my mind. I was going the way we were thinking about it, that we do the committees first. But I think there's a lot of advantages to making sure we're all on the same big picture.
Yep.
And then communicate how are we working or not working together to share that information.
Yeah, I think I agree too, because having a big picture idea of where the project is going is good with, particularly with so much uncertainty surrounding it. I think would be a helpful kind of baseline for the other discussion.
Okay, so I'll call for a vote. You summarize it. April 7th, 1 to 4. The topics will be basically how we're going to move forward with various scenarios on funding and scope and approaches and so on.
Can I just question, it wasn't how we're going to move forward, so what are the
Scenarios.
what are the
Yeah.
scenarios?
I meant
We're not going to decide what's most likely and what.
Yeah, so the first one is, here's where we are.
Enumeration of scenarios.
Yeah, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye,
I
aye. Okay, and how about Doug slipped off?
think we lost Doug. Yeah.
Okay, so I think we need one more.
Aye.
Eric got it. Yes. And the second meeting, you want to do that maybe in a series of meetings as part of the commission meeting?
I have not made a motion on that yet, but
We're just talking about.
I think that's, I would suggest looking at the meeting for the 14th and seeing if the agenda can be pared down to leave a good chunk of time for to start this discussion. And let you and Mike, let the Mikes figure this, identify whether that's the option.
And the Jakes.
Mike, well.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Yes, sir.
is there a precursor for that discussion and what I would, for the discussion of how we're working? Because what I would go back to is at some point we need to pull out our partnering workshop and look through that and see, what did we commit to that isn't working and reevaluate what that is. I think that rather than just starting from wherever we are, I think we ought to go back to where we've been and figure out what is the root problem. Because I think if we dig at it and scratch at it long enough, I think we'll find something there.
It's interesting too, because that makes me think, are there two discussion points? I think you raised a really good point about the partnering workshop, but that was really also about how we as the authority interface and work with HNTB and Kiewit. And I don't know that we can have that productive conversation, which I agree is also needed to reset on the commitments we all made in the partnering workshop until we're clear as an authority on our internal workings and how we see ourselves structuring. And I do kind of hope that this April 7th meeting will kind of give us all an active case study almost. I think it'll become clear to us now with some years under our belt as we're talking through scenarios and we see knowledge gaps or just key decision points where we all have a vested interest in, I want to vote there. That might help set some clarity around how we re-engage on what goes to a committee, what doesn't. But I kind of think that's got to happen first and then we.
Yeah, I keep going back to that partnering thing and I remember all the other tables had finished and all of us at the authority were still around the table trying to sort through what it was we were trying to understand and work with each other. And so what all the detail was there, I don't recall, but I do remember sitting at the table and everybody else milling off eating and we were still trying to, and I think at the end we got to some pretty meaty stuff, but I think just refreshing ourselves on what that was and being able to bring that to the conversation would be really important.
Your recollection is all your fault.
I'd like to make a suggestion that for that meeting, have two co-sponsors to it, Eric and Jacob. Would you guys be interested in kind of leading that discussion?
Well,
I think we first need to set what the.
We got to figure out what it
target will be.
It's a round robin.
That's it.
Discussion first, I think.
It's between you guys listening to us, but you formulate it and you run it.
Let's have a first meeting and let's see where it goes and see if we can figure out where. So I think we've moved apart from what we originally said we were trying to do. And I think deep down, we have some inherent trust issues that among part of our team. And until we kind of sort that out, I think it's going to be hard. And
Hey, all, I'm hoping, are we drawing to a conclusion? I can't tell if the discussion is broadening or narrowing at this point. And I actually am overdue at my next appointment. I just want to make sure.
So do we want to make a motion now to set a future date around this second item that's been raised, workshops, or are we tabling that for the moment to revisit?
What I propose, I guess I should have said, I move. So my proposal is that we ask the Mikes and Jake to look at the agenda for the meeting on, I don't know if they call it.
Oh, the 14th.
Monday, to see if they can free up enough time to start to tackle that
Okay.
subject.
have an initial
And
discussion.
if so, then we could, decide on the actual agenda at our meeting on the 7th.
I'll second that. Any discussion specific to that proposal? Seeing none.
Running the meetings.
Just trying to get stuff out of there. He's got to go get pickup, probably.
All in favor, aye?
Aye. Thank you, guys.
Brent, you're okay? I did an aye? Okay,
Thank you.
thanks, guys.
Childminders are by the minute.
That's right.
Okay. Informational items, a PR firm update. Who is going to give us a quick update on that?
Yeah, I think Dan Marr had a heart out too, so I can just briefly touch on it. We had put out a request for proposals to bring on additional support to the communications team. As a reminder, the communications team had been structured to be HNTB, who had a subcontractor to handle public information, a subcontractor to handle the intersection between government relations and all other communication. And we'd identified at the start of the year that we wanted an additional subcontractor that would be more targeted around crisis communications. So much of what I think we anticipate talking about at our April 7th meeting. Obviously, we have since then lost the subcontractor that supported public information. So I do want to just be very clear that we are bringing on MSH Strategies, who is out of Portland. They are being brought on specific to the scope that was advertised and what they responded to. And Jake, feel free to add anything, but I definitely would just want to communicate that the communications committee was very deliberative in this process. We had multiple conversations following up with MSH, as we know that our internal landscape has changed in terms of support. And there's still some ongoing discussions to figure out what those gaps are and to work with HNTB to have clarity on how they intend to provide that support to the project. But we felt it was important for where we are with this project to get MSH on. We feel very confident in their ability to come on and help us navigate, especially anticipating this April 7th workshop, what some of those likely scenarios are and desires from the commissioners about how much in front of some potential outcomes we might want to start messaging. So they'll be focused and targeting that space. And I anticipate if we see future complexities, especially to secure federal funding, that they will be involved in that type of more traditional PR earned media as well, as we try to continue to make our project front and center to secure the funding that we know we need to move to construction. So HNTB is working through that contract with them actively right now. And we expect some follow-up in the near term that's more about current scope when they're coming onto the project.
So
How many bids did you have?
We had five.
We interviewed 3.
Yeah. Yep.
And they're brought on to HNTB as a subcontractor.
Mm-hmm. And I think the plan is we want to meet with MSH and have a few strategic discussions before we figure out what the plan is for the public information side of things. If they can take up that role, or if HNTB can support us there, or if needs to be a third option evaluated. So,
Jake, I think the meeting that we're going to have 7th will help you guys figure out what kind of a message flow you're going to have in the next 6 or 7 months.
Yeah, and I think top of mind us is just the sense that as an authority, it has hurt to have lost the public information side of this project at such a critical point. We should have had some newsletters and communication and outreach out there. And so not having that kind of support on the project right now, I don't think benefits us. So figuring out as quickly as we can how we fill that gap is top of mind, I think, for the communications committee.
Mhm.
And you've talked to Mike, what I understand, Mike says he can absorb it in the funding profile that he's got.
Bringing on MSH, that is correct.
Yeah, our overall budget isn't changing. We're just, how it gets allocated, it's a little different.
Okay. That's information, so good. Thank you. Upcoming actions you can read through there. Anything else for the team before we adjourn? With that, we are adjourned. Thank you.
For that, on time.